It was a quarter to midnight, New Year's Eve, 1997, when we got a phone call that our house had burned down. We were on a ski trip, my family, my sister, and I, and my parents. And apparently a plumber had drilled through an electrical line and the house had exploded into flame. So we cut our ski trip short and came home, and I remember pulling into the driveway and seeing this carcass of a house. My dad opened the door and then closed it and was like, I guess we'll have to go to a hotel. My mom turned to us in the back and was like, well, there'll probably be a pool. And I was 13 at the time. My sister was 14, and so we were like, all right. And my mom was like that. She could make anything an adventure. When I was growing up, she and I were very close. I would do my homework in the kitchen, and when she was cooking dinner, I remember one time asking her about the definition for the word vein. She took out the Carly Simon CD and sang into a spatula around the kitchen. And she just was like this month of May for me. A real secure attachment. My dad at the time was working very hard and was really unpredictable when he was home. And so in this circumstance, she was like the same, She was like, this is going to be an adventure. And so we moved into a hotel. Now, of course, moved in is a funny term because we just had our bags that we packed for skiing. And it was my sister and I. We had never shared a room. And it was two of us, and we had one bathroom. We had never shared a bathroom either. There was kind of like a kitchenette, kind of dingy kitchenette area, small, refrigerator, sink, I guess, and then a couch, and then my parents were on the other side. And, my mom was like, all right, she did take us to the pool. We got room service once. And, of course, we had to buy clothing, too. My mom hates shopping. But I got out of, we had to go to gym class. I finally had a note, that got sent home from school being like, your daughter needs to get sneakers. It's no longer an excuse for skipping gym class. I had successfully skipped for 2 weeks in a row. And so she took us to the mall. And the first thing we did was she bought a Starbucks. And I felt like an adult. I was never allowed to have coffee. And I bought Jenko jeans because it was the skating era of the 90s. And a Capri Sun top. And I was like, this is amazing. She had gone back to the house, actually, and had gotten us bowls. She had sifted through the wreckage and found 2 bowls that were still, standing, and brought them back to the hotel and put them out for breakfast with cereal on the counter in the morning in this hotel room. And, I remember one day doing homework on the bed because there's no place to do homework when you live in a hotel, really. There's no, table, etc. So I was doing some work, and I was like, it was 8 p.m., and I was like, I need colored pencils and scissors. Bring those on a ski trip, so we didn't have them. And so we ended up going to Staples that night, which was really exciting for me. It's school supplies in a February, yes. So we trundled out down the hallway, down the elevator, across the hallway, across the lobby, from the short-term parking to the long-term parking, and we hopped in our car and went to Staples, and we spent $200 at Staples. And my mom let me get this heavy, ridiculous stapler that I still have. Actually, it weighs 4.5 pounds. But I wanted to be an adult, and she was all about the adventure. And it's why it was really funny one day when I woke up at 1:30 in the morning on a Tuesday to the sound of crying. And hotels for me at 13 were vacations. They were weddings. They were visiting grandma. Tears were not a part of them. And so I was pretty shocked that I heard that I was listening to somebody cry, pretty hard, pretty loud, enough to wake me up. And my sister was asleep in the bed next to me, but I could see a light on underneath the door from the kitchenette. So I pulled back my sheet, and I tiptoed over the bags. There's no place really to put your stuff, so you end up kind of living in bags. And I walked over to the door, and I put my hand on the handle, and I snuck it open very quietly. There's this kind of sliver of light, and I could see this kind of single fluorescent bulb over the kitchen. And there was my mom on her hands and knees, just crying, bawling. And she had on these pink gloves, and she had soft scrub and a sponge. I don't know where she got any of that stuff, but somehow it had appeared, and she had taken out the contents of our mini fridge. Individual yogurts, small bags of carrots. They were lined up on the counter like soldiers. Things that would fit in that small fridge. And she was scrubbing it, cleaning the fridge at 1:30 in the morning. Just tears. She was wiping her eyes occasionally and the crook of her elbow. And I was like, I didn't know what to do. I watched her, I lived in a hotel. People came and cleaned. I didn't know what she was doing cleaning. I didn't know what she was doing at 1:30 in the morning, and I had really, honestly, never seen her cry like that. And the weight of it hit me, still hits me. I was watching her grieve, and I realized in a moment, she had things to grieve for. This is the house my dad had designed. It was the place where she had raised us for 10 years. She lost her wedding dress and photos. She was experiencing real loss. Under the adventure, it was really hard. And at that same moment, it kind of watching her grieve allowed me to feel too. And I remember feeling welling up and tears streaming down my face as I realized I had experienced loss as well. Lost the place where I grew up and the banisters we rode as horses and my stuffed animal I was afraid, embarrassed to admit I still had. And the garden she and I kept in the back. We were never going to go back and get the garlic that we planted that. We weren't going back. And I just tears started coming, and I didn't know what to say to make myself feel any better or to make her feel any better. So I, leaned my head against the door frame. And together, but separately, we grieved the loss of our home. Thank you. So my house burned down in 97, and we had to move 6 times while we kind of found another house to live in that was full-time. We rented and bought, and then had to fix a sewer line, and then rented. And so by the time my parents had moved into a full house, I was in college and didn't really care anymore. And they're still living there, which is great. And So I went to college, and I've worked kind of with children and at-risk youth kind of since then, so kids who are also experiencing issues of homelessness or substance problems, both with Outward Bound. I was a sailboat captain in Boston, and then I did Teach for America, and I taught for 4 years in a classroom as a science teacher in Denver. And I just finished law school here at the University of Washington in June, and I'm now an attorney. And I work on issues of child welfare and K-12 education here in the state. So that's kind of my full circle. And it's interesting, I just wanted to kind of say this too, is that I am not someone that really identifies as having been housing unstable or homeless at any point in my life. That's not a label or an identity really that I think about, but it is, doing this whole process with the Moth has been really interesting because I realized how much it did really affect me. I mean, I came in with a totally different story, and as I workshopped, the story came out. And it was so challenging for me from 13 to 18 to be moving that much and have nothing for a little while. And I came from relative privilege. We had insurance on the house. My dad had a job. We were fine in terms of economics, and it still was so difficult for me. And I think that's one of the things that I bring to my work now is that kind of perspective that the instability, even when you have cushion and when you have a safety net, is still incredibly challenging. 2 years ago in 2014, I had the privilege of working on the Homeless Student Education Act. I was my second year of law school, and I worked with 5 students and Columbia Legal Services with Casey Trupin and Katara Jordan, and we kind of figured out there was this kind of gaping hole of student homelessness, so young people who are in the education, who are getting their education, and we talked to all these stakeholders, and we wrote a bill, and we lobbied for it, and it got passed. But in Washington, there are over 30,000 homeless students. And of those students, their graduation rate is 46%. So out of all the demographics that we currently track, is actually the single worst performing, group of students. There's not a lot of chatter about what to do, or it's like just starting, I guess, in terms of tracking numbers and trying to figure it out. And that was really exciting for me to be a part of, because I feel like I was a really good student, but when all of a sudden you have nothing but this one bag, my grades dropped, and I really struggled in school despite having pretty much every advantage. And so I think that's something that needs to continue to be discussed, because if those students aren't graduating, I think everyone deserves a fair shot and a fair shake, and I think that the students need more support. And so I think that's another thing that people sometimes don't think about, is the correlation between the instability when you move schools, or you're moving houses, you're missing school because of your housing situation. That can create a lot of discontinuity for the student, which makes it difficult to learn over time and then graduate.